these things are happening. As you said, these things that we don't even know about, they're happening to our athletes anyway. So to ask them about them, or to say, I'm not a therapist. This isn't part of my job. Well, they're happening. So we can ignore them, and we're going to deal with them. We're going to deal with them on the court. We're going to deal with them on the ice or the pitch or whatever it might be. Or we can address them beforehand, and show up connected and as a team.
Welcome to the Cutting Edge Coaching Podcast, where we believe coaches are some of the most important teachers and leaders in the world, and they deserve to be supported. I'm your host, Luke Gromer, and every week we're bringing you conversations with coaches, experts, and leaders from across sports that will give you practical ideas and strategies that you can apply in your coaching to develop high-performing teams and high-character people. Coaches, welcome back to part 2 of my conversation with Paula McQuaid and Jessica Renney, co-founders of Hone Athletics. Hone is dedicated to improving sport through mental well-being. Hone's digital platform is built on a decade of sport-specific mental health experience. It's their goal to empower coaches with the knowledge and tools needed to develop both sides of the athlete, the mental and emotional side, as well as the physical side. Paula is a Gonzaga University graduate with a Master of Counselling and a member of the Canadian Counselling and Psychotherapy Association. When not working with clients as a psychotherapist and growing Hone, she also acts as a mental performance consultant for Hockey Canada's women's U18 national team. Jessica received her bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Lethbridge, and then later her Master's of Arts in Counseling Psychology from the University of Victoria. Jess is also an active member of the Canadian Counseling and Psychotherapy Association. Jessica grew up surrounded by sport. Her father was a coach in the NHL for 13 years, and she was exposed to the importance of supporting wellness in high-performing cultures. She became dedicated to bringing to light the ways that leaders can better support development, both as individuals and performers. In part 2 of this conversation, we dive into shaping peer-to-peer relationships, clarifying expectations, and helping athletes perform at their best. As always, if you enjoy this episode and you want to grab a copy of the free podcast notes, go to cuttingedgecoach.com or click the link in the show details to download a free PDF of notes from this episode or any episode of the podcast. Now to part 2 of my conversation with Paula and Jessica. Enjoy the episode. I think one of the challenges for me that I consistently find with this, and I'd love to hear some of your guys' insights on this, is shaping the peer-to-peer interactions, because I think one of the things that can obviously negatively impact the mental well-being or mental health of athletes on a team, a huge factor in it is the peer relationships. And I'm sure that we've experienced, or you've worked with lots of teams where the relationships between athletes are a driver of those 63% of kids that are experiencing some sort of mental health issue that's impacting their ability to perform. And so I guess what I want to talk about is how, as coaches, can we try to shape our environments so that really, I guess, so that there's positive relationships fostered between the athletes, so that that isn't one of the factors that is negatively impacting their mental well-being or mental health in our team context. Because again, negative peer-to-peer relationships and interactions, you can just see the anxiety that can bring up in athletes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is I'll jump in because this is right up my alley. We're talking about our culture here. So as coaches, we are responsible for the culture of our team. We have to set up what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, and then our players will figure that out. And they have a responsibility as well to uphold that. You spoke about cursing earlier, which thankfully you let us know. But you spoke about cursing earlier, and that is set up on your team. They know that's not okay, and guess what? They follow it. So whatever we set up on our team, they're going to do it. They're going to learn from that. They'll pick it up, and it's beautiful because it will catch on year to year. So we'll walk in and we're on Luke's team and we know these are the expectations. That is so much simpler to walk into that atmosphere. And letting our players know that it is not okay to mistreat each other. It is not okay to, bully or whatever it might be. You don't have to like each other, but you have to treat each other with respect. You have to be kind. Um, and that's the reality. Not everybody's going to like each other, but can they work together?
Yeah, Jessica, any thoughts on that?
Hmm. I think I go to, this place where we always talk about modeling and
Hmm.
the concept of modeling. And as a coach, just being mindful of how we're interacting, how,
Mm,
we're treating, the janitorial staff, or how we're speaking to parents, or it's not always easy to kind of keep that in check, for sure. I was trying to get 2 6-year-olds out the door today, go to school, and I was like, keep it in check, lady, keep it in check. It is hard. It's hard, and constant kind of reflection, but really, making sure athletes know what we stand for and what we fall for, like Paula said, and that starts with us. That starts with kind of how we interact with them and the people around us.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's clarity is so important for the athletes in our environment. I'm
mhm,
constantly trying to reflect on, have I actually defined this for them or set this expectation for them? Uh, I think there are so many things that frustrate us as coaches, the things that cause us to lose our cool in a practice or a game, that if we take a minute to think about, we'd have to realize, oh, you know what? I've actually never explicitly taught them this or communicated this to them. I just kind of expected it. And so, like,
mhm.
I'll give you an example here, and this one happens, and my guys, they've definitely started to get it now, is in practice when we're playing a game and there are substitutes on the sideline or the baseline. Nothing bugs me more than slow and lazy. There we go. That's the word. A slow and lazy
Lazy.
substitute. So I'm like, subs, let's go. And they like wander onto the court. They don't call a kid's name out. And it's just a waste of time. Like, bugs me to no end. And so the first couple times this happened, I'm like, I blow the whistle. I'm like, stop, you guys, go back. This is how we do substitutes. You are going to yell someone's name, you're gonna jog out there, and you're gonna give them a high five. And I'm like,
Mhm.
"Now let's try it again." And then they do it again, and I'm not kidding. On one of my teams, we had to redo it. Like, in that moment, I was like, "Nope, that's not it. Go back, do it again." We did it like 4 or 5 times. Like, they're frustrated. I'm like, "This is how it," and finally they got it. Like, they yelled it out, and that's how you do it every time. And, I think that, like a small example, but I think it's worth taking time to reflect on as a coach. Okay, like, what are the things that bug me or frustrate me? And then how do I want these things done here? And then I need
Mhm.
to communicate that and teach that. And then to what you said, Paula, as well, we've got to talk about what's acceptable and unacceptable, even at a higher level of like values, right? I'm talking one specific minute
Mhm.
example, but values and culture and how we're going to be and our team identity and how we treat each other. And then the last part is, and this is the hardest part, is you have to be willing to hold it, enforce it all the time, right? Or
Mhm.
um, with what's the word I'm looking for here? Uh, Consistency, both consistency and understanding, right? There are situations, right,
Mhm.
where I maybe have an expectation, but then I learn about the situation with an athlete. I'm like, okay, it really, I can't apply this here because what happened is not your fault, right? Like this kid, I
Yeah.
had a kid that missed practice, but the reason was that he had no one to drive him to school, and he actually like whatever it might be, or like a kid that showed up halfway through my class. He's also on my team. I'm like, "Why are you late?" And he's like, "Well, I didn't have anyone at home and I missed the bus, so I walked here in the
Oh,
rain." It's like, "Okay." Like,
oh gosh.
I'm not mad.
Yeah.
And if
Mhm.
I was going to apply some black and white rule to this circumstance, then I'm the fool here, because like I should have a little bit of understanding for the situation in front of me. So I think that's one of the hardest
Mm.
parts, but one of the most important parts of coaching is we absolutely have this standard and expectation, and we're willing to ask the question to understand the situation to figure out,
Mhm.
okay, like what is practically wise here and how I handle the situation, because not every situation is the same. And I think that we can create additional stressor, or just honestly sometimes lose our team if we handle all situations the same and don't have a level of understanding or empathy for the unique situations that our players are in at
Mhm.
times.
Absolutely.
I think too, Luke, when you say, that's hard as coaches, I think we have to take a really good look at, how we each define coaching and kind of what that entails. And Paul and I hear this often. We're not therapists. We're not here to ask questions or be that person for someone. And we argue all the time, like, yeah, you are, right? Like, this is a part of coaching. This is a part of shaping and molding kids and passing on to them that uh, in all situations, it's about all of our different parts and all of the different pieces of us, not just the athletic one. So I think that it really starts in so many ways with what is our personal definition of coaching, and do we think that it includes having that human connection with our athletes? I'm sure almost every coach would say, yeah, of course it does. So if it does, then what are we doing about it? How are we bringing that into every single interaction we have with our
Go ahead, Paul. Do you have something to
Yeah,
add?
yeah, I was just gonna say these things are happening. As you said, these things that we don't even know about, they're happening to our athletes anyway. So to ask them about them, or to say, I'm not a therapist, this isn't part of my job. Well, they're happening. So we can ignore them and we're gonna deal with them. We're gonna deal with them on the court, we're gonna deal with them on the ice or the pitch or whatever it might be. Or we can address them beforehand, and show up connected and as a team.
Yeah, I think that's a great point as well. That they're happening, you can ignore them or you can address them, and
Mhm.
that brings up a great point of just as coaches, eh, w- we have to be willing to have the hard or uncomfortable conversations, right? To ask the questions that might put us in a situation where, like, I don't really know how to handle this, uh, and I think that we need to be willing to also admit that in some of those situations too. Like, you
Mhm.
an athlete may share something with you, like, I honestly I don't know how to handle this right now, or I need to talk to some other people that
Right.
maybe do know how to handle this, and that's okay. But yeah, again, like Jessica, you're saying, and Paul, you're saying, it's like if we really just think coaching is, you know, some technical, tactical, moving some pawns in a game to try to win it, that's great. Then ignore all of this stuff. But if you realize that coaching is also involving human beings, and if you're willing to take time to reflect on the coaches that you've had that have probably inspired you to coach, and or just to reflect on, like, what people want and need. I'm reading a book right now by Chip and Dan Heath called The Power of Moments, and in this book, he's talking about moments of insight, and those light bulb moments for us as people. And then at one
Mhm.
point, he's talking about mentors and coaches, and he kind of puts in this sarcastic quote in there that there's never been someone that said, "Oh, like I loved coach so and so so much. He had no expectations for me and he didn't challenge me at all." Like, that's not right. Like,
Yeah.
we all want coaches that challenge us, but also care about us. And
Mhm.
like we must have both of them. That's what the people we lead want. I mean, that's what I want. Right? And the people that lead
Mhm.
me, I want them to know me, care about me, and to make me better. If you, yeah, one without the other, and like it's just either people will despise you because all you do is challenge them and you don't care about them. It's like, I hate listening to you. I tune you out. Or if you just care about them and you don't challenge them and help them get better, it's like you just don't have any credibility. Like, you're not helping me improve.
No.
And all of us, like, are selfish and we want to improve, right? Like, and that's not a bad thing. Our
Mhm.
athletes want to improve, they want to grow, and they need to know and see that we can actually help them grow. and then combine that with the care. And like we've been talking about, like that's where there's the special sauce is there, right? And their performance too, because we care about their performance. They care about their performance. And so I
Of
think
course.
like we've got to recognize that of like we got to pair both of these things together, all in hopes of one,
Mhm.
serving them, but then two, like allowing them to perform at their best. Because at least for me, like that's how I view a huge part of my job is I want to put them in the best position to perform at their best. And these
Right.
things that we've been talking about, right? Mental well-being, if it's not in a good place or if I'm not positively impacting it some way, well, it's probably not going to allow them to perform at their best.
Right. And if you want them to perform at their best, we need to see like the whole athlete. We need
Hmm.
to allow all of them to come forward. And as a coach, if it's like tactical, that's it. Well, you've got half of it. And they're not going to be able to show up to the full capacity.
Yeah.
And I think
So
too, we're in a generation, or we talk. I don't. Paula talks a lot about kind of the different generations and how different people are needing different things. And I think it's really important too to take a look at kind of what our young people are wanting and what our athletes are wanting, and just because they're wanting something as a coach, it doesn't mean that it's wrong or bad, or they don't have what it takes. I think it's a lot harder for us to reflect as coaches and think to ourselves, am I giving them what they need? Am I providing that space and that environment that they need to thrive in? Maybe it was different when we were athletes. However, it is our job to evolve with the human
Mm.
and with what's happening in our world. So I think that's really, really important too. Our athletes want to know, why am I doing this drill?
mm,
They want to know, why they want things that matter. They want purpose. And for us to sit here and say, well, that's not right, I'm not coaching that way, shame on us, right? Like, we have to really take into consideration what the need is of the individuals in front of us as well.
yeah, it's so true. And maybe this is harsh, but the coaches that are saying that are I would say probably more often the ones that are leaving, right? Like that's not right.
Yeah,
And they
yeah,
and they're the and they find themselves in situations where they're being not exclusive, right? Maybe this is too much of a generalization, but they're being fired because they're unwilling to change, right? Or forced out because they won't change and do things differently. And
yeah.
then it's often like, oh, the blame goes other places for them instead of actually I really need to make a change here. And I think yeah, like you're saying, it's so important that we're willing to evolve and recognize that um, the individuals I'm coaching, they may be different. That doesn't mean that they're bad, right? They've grown up in a different world
Mhm,
and environment, and so it makes
mhm.
sense that they would be different than me, right? And I think that
Yeah.
we need to have the humility to recognize that and learn about them and how we can engage with them in an effective way.
Mhm.
I want to talk
And
about,
it can.
or go ahead, Paula.
Oh,
No,
I
go
was just
ahead,
gonna say
please.
it can like let's. Yeah, it can be scary, right? As a
Mhm.
coach to be like, "Oh gosh, okay, so we're asking me to put on this different hat and to try some new things." And yeah, it's gonna feel odd, but you said it so beautifully when you're like, Sometimes I don't have the answer." And to say to an athlete or say to a young person who looks up to us, like, "I don't know what to do here. Let's figure it out." That is so powerful. That like teaches them that they don't have to have the answers all the time. That's amazing. So to walk and or even to say to your team, I'm trying some new stuff here. So we're not expecting coaches to come in and have all the answers to this. You're allowed to plow through it. You're allowed to figure it out as you go along and just be open about it. And it's such incredible modeling for our young people.
Yeah, that's really good. Let's talk about really maybe some strategies of how coaches can engage with mental health in positive ways, build some things into their coaching that support their athletes' mental health, and yeah, move the needle on it in a positive direction. I think as we've been talking about this, obviously it's apparent that it's got to be more than just a one time thing. It's not like we show them a video and we're like, ah, done. So let's talk about how do we incorporate it into our plans to develop our individuals and our teams. Maybe you can share practical ways that you've seen coaches do this in their environments, or what you guys recommend that coaches do. Really, what does it look like on the ground with your team to do some of this well?
Mhm.
This makes me think about, was working with a coach a couple days ago, and she's been with this team for, I think, like 35 years. And a tremendous human and a tremendous coach, and has recently kind of run into some struggles. And she just said, I've never, I've what I typically do works, and I'm at a loss. The girls aren't connecting, and I'm not sure what to do. And I think that is the most powerful starting point. When a coach can say, okay, I know this is important. I know this is something that we need to address. I don't know how. So I'm going to bring people in that are professionals, or that that have a very much better understanding of this stuff than I do. So a coach's willingness, I think, is first and foremost. And we talk a lot about this. And you even said it, Luke. The ones who don't abide to any of this, well, we can just disregard it. However, I've been just so impressed by, the ones who I maybe thought wouldn't, and have been open and shifted, and they're trying. So I think, not to put all this on the coach, but I think it's a really, really awesome starting point for a coach to say, okay, like, this is now a part of the game. This is a part of kind of how sport is going. What do I do, and how do I do it? So starting with that place of, that humility, really, as a coach, and to say, I don't know how to do it, but I'm going to learn.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And I think that as a coach, that's what I hope my athletes are willing to do and say, like, I'm not good at this yet. This is new. This is a struggle, but I'm willing to stick with it and try. And again, we talked about modeling earlier, but how powerful for us to model it. Guys, this is new for me, but I recognize it's important. I'm trying to get better at it. And I think I am, again, consistently impressed by this generation of kids and athletes when you are transparent and honest with them about something like that. Guys, this is new, right? This might be uncomfortable for me. I'm trying something here, and I'm going to see how it goes. Maybe I'll change it. Maybe we'll stick with it. Uh, I just find that my athletes are very receptive when I'm honest with them, and I think that that's a great point about, we should be humble, we should be willing to learn, and then I think we should be honest with them about it. Paula, you have any thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, I just right now it's just making me think about, like, all of the relationships in our lives. Like, if we're honest and we're straight up, they go better, right? And it can be translated to those relationships we have with our athletes. Um, yeah, I had some thoughts, but I kind of lost them right now.
You were doing, actually, 'cause I was watching, actually, Paula do a coach consult with someone, and so I can maybe address it a little better because I saw you do it. When it comes to relationships, and it comes to, we know athletes sometimes don't have kind of the exposure to all the relationships in their lives that are important. To get that going, and to kind of get them to look outside their team. We know that when athletes are feeling connected, when they're feeling like they have that connection with other people in their life, the other stressors they manage with more ease. So relationships is tremendously important, and foster and facilitating our athletes to feel that connectiveness. So something as easy as, what's one person, I think, I don't know how you said it, Paula, correct me if I'm wrong. But someone, shoot a text to someone you've been thinking about. Just text them, or your
Mm,
favorite person. Shoot them a text. Or call. I mean, kids these days text. I would call, but you can text. But just let's get them, and facilitate them kind of thinking beyond this singular group of 15. Who can they text, who can they connect with, and it's amazing how that snowballs. And amazing how their worlds become a little bit bigger when we're starting to get them to think outside of sport.
mhm. And if we want to shift the needle, and we're bringing this awareness of mental wellness, and we're talking about these different stressors within our teams, our young people are going to start paying attention to these different areas. We're like, hey, how are your relationships? Are you feeling connected with people? How's the pressure going? If we're addressing these things, they're going to start paying attention. And so when stuff is showing up, they're going to recognize it quicker. And they're going to be like, hey, I need to do something here, or I'm doing good here, or I can use some help here. They're also going to recognize it in each other. So, if I'm really attuned to relationships in my life and how are they going, I might notice that, Ronaldo over there is kind of struggling a little bit. And so we're growing them in ways that we like, I think are beyond, they're amazing. They're beyond what we would think of it as coaching. We're not just doing the X's and O's. This is far, far bigger than that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the last things I want to talk about a little bit with you guys is, obviously Hone, the app that you guys have, the tool that supports coaches and teams. The players fill out a weekly survey, and you guys say it was 10 questions?
7 questions.
7
So
questions.
we asked them about 6. Yep.
Can you guys talk about
Yeah,
those questions and why you ask the specific questions you do? And maybe what insights they provide for coaches?
Yeah, sure. So we're asking them about, as I kind of mentioned, we're asking them about pressure, like how they're managing pressure, fatigue, overall wellness. We want to get a snapshot of how they feel like they're doing overall, looking at relationships, connection, criticism, all of those different areas in our lives. Because those things in research there's not a tremendous amount of research out there in regards to wellness in athletes. It's getting more and more. But those ones show up that if those specific areas are not doing well there, or they're doing very well, it will impact their performance overall. So those are the ones that we want to touch on. Those are the ones we want to keep an eye on as coaches, and continually address.
And I think too, it's really important, in our app, it is anonymous. We have, Paula and I have really made it our mission to make sure that we're providing a tool for athletes. We always say this is built from sport for sport. This isn't something that's taken from a different vertical and plopped onto sport. We wanted to make sure that we were going to impact the 10%. That if there were athletes struggling, and we know there is, and I would argue that number is way greater than 60%. We wanted to shift 10%. So we saw, only 10% of athletes are getting help. Well, why? So really dug into, and through our market research and with our experience and obviously the academic research, there were little nuances that helped athletes reach out. So we made sure that was a part of the home delivery, and coaches were a huge part of that. How could we empower and support coaches to create those cultures of wellness so that the athlete felt comfortable to get the help they needed?
Yeah, that's good. I'm curious, athletes are filling out these surveys, and then as a coach, you're getting a report on your team overall, I'm assuming, because they're anonymous. So talk to me about what advice you would give, or what a coach should do when they look at this report and they're like, oh, this is bad. My team is not in a good spot right now. And maybe it's in a specific area or just overall. My team is struggling. Now what?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and one that we get quite a bit. And the first thing I would say is, despite Paula and I being certified Canadian psychotherapists, so we certainly have the background to be having these conversations. The app we created is not diagnosing individuals. So we're not asking questions where we're diagnosing people with certain mental health concerns. The app is completely built to help coaches identify where they can shift and pivot to create that culture. So when a coach sees that, we actually, we have a very much a human element to, not shocking, as we're talking about athletes being human, to the app. So every single coach is tagged to a home CSM. So someone like us, someone who has the experience and training in helping individuals kind of create those cultures of wellness. So I know you want me to give you something offhand, Luke, but it's so hard because if I saw data, I'd be able to give you a little bit of an understanding. But I think that just speaks to the dynamicness of every group and every coach, right? Our app, it's not canned. It is about sitting down with that hone CSM and coming up with solutions or trying things together, or them pulling from someone else and saying, hey, I had a coach do this and it worked really well. So it's really important for us that coach is feeling supported, and having that individual and that human that they can speak to, not a bot, not huge on bots over here. So we can really make sure that we're supporting the coaches.
And coaches have incredible ideas. I mean, coaches by nature are creative. They come up with plans and ideas, and they have provided us with some beautiful ideas on how they're going to address our data. And you said the scores show up really poor. How am I going to address it? Like, you can have these conversations with your team. Like, these things can be open. You can talk to them about the data. We want you to talk to them about what they're sharing with you. But come up with ideas. Talk with your staff or your coaching staff or whomever on how can we address this. And we always say, like, coaches have incredible relationships with their athletes, and you know them best. So you know what's going to work. And we're here to help you figure it out. And how will we deliver this? How is it going? And be that support for coaches as they are for their athletes.
Yeah, it's good. I appreciate that, because I would agree that this often as coaches, we want a cookie cutter solution, and there's not a lot of them because every group is different, individuals are different. And yeah, there's 10, 15, 20, 30 relationships on your team, and then they all have relationships with each other. There's a lot of dynamics. And so one thing is not necessarily going to magically solve our issues. And so I appreciate that. And I think what you bring up is great. It's like, talk to your coaches, talk to them about it, and have those conversations that can start the ball rolling. I think as you do that, right, inspiration often strikes after we take action. Sometimes the best thing to do is just to do something, and then there's more inspiration that strikes. I think sometimes we're looking for inspiration before we take action, and often we just need to do something first. And it's okay if we screw it up. At least we took some action and tried it.
We tried.
Yeah. Well, Jessica and Paul, this has been awesome. Before we wrap it up and hop off, just share with the listeners where they can connect with you guys and learn more about the work that you guys are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So our site, honeathletics.com, it's a really good understanding of what the app is and how coaches can use it. And there's a Let's Talk button that we're happy to kind of talk about this stuff to lots of different people. This is obviously something we're terribly passionate about, creating spaces of wellness for our athletes. So the website would be the best place. And obviously we're on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, all that kind of stuff under athletics.
Awesome. Ladies, this has been awesome. Again, I appreciate your time. Thanks for the work that you're doing and for sharing so much with coaches today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Luke.
Coaches, thanks for listening to this episode, and a huge thanks to Paula and Jessica for joining me. Coaches, thanks for listening to this episode, and a huge thanks to Paula and Jessica for joining me. You can find links to connect with Paula and Jessica in the show details. As always, if you enjoyed the episode and you want to grab a copy of the free podcast notes, go to cuttingedgecoach.com/podcast or click the link in the show details to download a free PDF of notes from this episode or any episode of the podcast. Thanks for listening to the podcast.